Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the promising and in many ways heartening events unfolding in the US as many, as also it's reported at least, many illegal aliens in the US are going back across the U.S. Mexican border and heading out. So they're self-deporting. Now, this is a good thing, I would argue. I don't know what the numbers are. The photographs and images suggest the lines are long and that there's many people self-deporting. They seem to be the more affluent ones, though. When you look at the sort of motor vehicles, the cars these people seem to be driving, there's no old shit boxes or rust buckets there. They've got some pretty nice looking cars, so they must be doing all right. But anyway, I don't know how genuine these photographs are, or whether those are people just going on a vacation, or what they're up to, or whether the images are genuine in any way. Let's assume they are for the moment, and there are lots of people self-deporting. Now, we don't know how many, but again, given that the numbers of illegals, I noticed, by the way, that the CNN and the MSNBC are claiming that there's only 11 million illegals in the United States. Now, just going back, that number of 11 million was being touted and thrown around when Bill Clinton was president. So we're talking, in the mid 1990s, there were supposedly 11 million, and so in the last 30 years, there's not a single, not even one fresh illegal aliens come into the United States. I mean, talk about an absurd stretch to push that one. I mean, what a blatant lie that is to be stated on mass media. Now, even if you take a minimum number, that there's been something in the order of at least 12, but most likely 16 to 17 million plus illegals have come into the US since Bill Clinton's day, then the number would be approximately 30 million. Most estimates now are suggesting, people in the know, suggesting 35 million plus the children. So it's closer to 60 million overall illegals and their progeny. So, and just to state that it's 11 million in total, I mean, what a lie. Nonetheless, so they're heading back across the US border. Now, if we look at the wider international dynamics at play here, there's an administration in the United States now that wants to mass deport illegals. Okay, so people are self-deporting. Now, one of the issues with self-deporting is they're in the US undetected and unknown already. Then they leave the US undetected and unknown. So all they have to do is go back to Mexico or Guatemala or Colombia or wherever. All they have to, or everything, it could be India, anywhere at all. All they have to do is go back to their countries where they've got wider families, second cousins, and all this sort of thing. The village out in the hills and the rural, shanty town. All they do is go back in there and wait until there's another Democrat, globalist stooge flunky president in the White House, and then they can just walk straight back in. They'll be not only allowed but invited, exhorted to come back to the United States when such a globalist, administration is in place. They'll be pardoned. They'll be given a red carpet treatment to come back. So that's all they've got to do. Now, the dynamics that cause them to want to move to the United States is they live in poor economies and basket case economies and corrupt economies, drug lord economies, all that sort of stuff. And they think, well, I've got a better chance of making a buck if I go to a rich first world country. Well, okay. I mean, who wouldn't think that? And as long as the globalists take this view of mass people movement is how things should be, and there's no penalties for it, you're invited to come in illegally, even though you're an illiterate peasant and all this sort of stuff, then there's no obstacle to them, assuming, again, a globalist administration in the US, which inevitably will come at some point. then they just walk straight back in and no questions asked and take up where they left off. Now, sure, it's disruptive and sure it's breaks the continuity, and the globalists would rather not, and it disrupts globalist plans. Yeah, all this sort of stuff's true. But really, they just put their plans on hold for a few years and then off they go again. Same as they did in President Trump's first administration. They harassed him and lawfared him and undermined him at every turn. And sure, it slowed down their program, but they more than made up for that as soon as they installed Biden with that rigged election in 2020, and just doubled or tripled the amount of illegals that they wanted to bring in, and engage in all sorts of treacherous and deceitful and underhanded behaviour to move them all around the country and put the illegals into small towns and so on. So they more than made up for their loss of momentum during President Trump's first term. So it just shows how quickly they can just not only put their plans back in place, but simply jig up the numbers so that they've compensated for any lost momentum in whether it be mass migration or whatever else they're planning. Now, those economies of like the Mexicos and the Guatemala, they're not going to change in the next 4 years, 8 years, 12 years, however long. If we take the most optimistic consideration, the Republicans will be at least sufficiently influential in the administration, whether it be in the White House or majorities in the House and the Senate, to prevent a return to globalist policies. That is to stop, the no mass migration and so on. So in the event that there's 12 years of doing that, that's again hugely disruptive to the globalists. But it's to them that's not irreparable. Like they can just okay, we're back in now. All right, then. Well, we would have brought in 2 million a year illegals. But we've been out of office for 12 years, so we'll just bring in 5 million a year illegals now. And they can and will do it. They'll just ride roughshod over the law, the Constitution. Anyone who disagrees with them, they'll put them in prison. That's how hard-nosed these dudes are. They're ideological fanatics, and they don't believe in the law or the Constitution. It's just an inconvenience to them, and they'll happily walk all over it or trash it or ignore it as it suits them. So to what extent is it a victory? Now, for mine, I don't like the idea that these people undetected already in the the illegal aliens, undetected in the US already can just drive across the border and as if nothing ever happened. Do we, or the American government, the US government, do they know who they are? Do they have their fingerprints, their names, the records of what driver's licenses are they using that they got illegally? What fake social security numbers have they got that they were using illegally? So there should be interception at the border and the processing that makes sure that fingerprints and retina scans or whatever is taken on. So if these people are now unable to come back in, and that legislation is passed in the Congress of the United States to enshrine that in law, so that it makes it very difficult for globalist administrations to come back in and go, we'll just take up where we left off before, which, make no mistake, they'll do. And so there needs to be detailed processing and record keeping of all of these people, so they just can't come back in again in a few years' time. In a worst case scenario, the globalists will find a way of rigging the election in 4 years' time. It'd be tough for them to do, but it wouldn't be possible. They did it during Trump's first administration. They just blatantly and brazenly rigged the election using COVID as a cover story and to blow enough smoke into the room that people couldn't see what was going on. But the failure of the non-globals to see this coming and to take action against it was, one of the huge failings, I think, of that first administration of President Trump. He seems wise to the game now, but back then they wrong-footed him at almost every turn. Now, this idea that the globalists, if say they're back in office in 4 years, to them it's just they're looking at this on a longer term project. It's a 25, 50-year project to them. And they're determined to get there no matter what. I mean, people like Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates, I mean, they'll all be dead by that time. But they're looking at, they've got a lot of young people who are fanatical ideological, followers. They've put in key positions all around the place, in the public service, in the think tanks, and so on. And so just because Schwab dies, it's old age, I think he's in his mid-80s or something now. Just because that cohort of people pass away doesn't mean that the fanaticism or the ardor or the ideological gleam in the eye is just going to disappear. It won't. So if they do get control in 4 years, I don't think they will actually, but if they do, then they'll just take it where they left off. Now, the longer they're delayed in doing this, the harder it will be for them to resurrect it. Well, not impossible, it'd just be more difficult. And in my view, the Trump administration should certainly focus on instilling as many laws, passed by Congress, as many laws as they can to prevent, inhibit, obstruct, delay any attempt to return to this mass immigration insanity, and to just make it such a chore and such hard work for them that they'll either give up or they'll have to accept a heavily watered down version of what they want. Either way, it would be a serious blow against the globalists, and that needs to be the object. This is the game that they play. You got to play. I mean, they're effectively defining the rules of the game, and so it needs to be accepted. Those are the ground rules. That's the battle plan, if you like, and to respond accordingly to it. But in a sublime sort of optimistic outcome, the Republicans will be in for 8 to 12 years. And if it's 12 years, then the globalist program will probably be irreparably damaged. They'll try and switch the focus to Western Europe, Britain and France and Germany. But even that's turning out to be a chore, and they're overreaching heavily there in order to maintain the globalist, the hateful, horrible globalist dream that they have. But nonetheless, let's see how that pans out. But I'm not that excited by this self-deportation. I don't believe the numbers are that great. I hope they increase, considerably in the coming weeks and months. But that these people are escaping accountability, again, just slipping across the border and then coming back in anytime they want when conditions are more suitable to them, then that needs to be recognised and efforts made to put a stop to it. Otherwise, you've just got a huge wave crossing the Mexican border or crossing from the US into Mexico, and then a huge wave coming back again as soon as there's a globalist administration in the US. I mean, what's been achieved there? Almost nothing. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.